I've been letting this soak for a while this morning with just a pretty saturated paper towel to try to soften that Elmer's glue. I'm 99% sure, just by looking at it, that it is Elmer's glue. Not 100% sure. You're never 100% sure anything on these old instruments. But I'm pretty sure that's what that is. Unfortunately, it's not turning real cloudy real fast. I thought it would have already softened by now, but I guess it's so old that it's just really dried out. And it's really thick glue. So what we have to do is we first have to get rid of that old glue. Just as a side tip, anytime you're gluing wood together, and I don't care if you're working on instruments or something else, if you're repairing something especially, you have to remove the old glue. Gluing to glue just does not work. In other words, if you've got a glued surface, it comes apart and you try to re-glue it, it may or may not hold. It may hold for a while, but if there's any stress on it at all, it will come loose again. And so the key to making a good glue joint, literally, is very simple. You just clean off the old glue. If you can get the old glue off, get the two wooden surfaces mated up really good together, and put good glue on it, squeeze them together, squeeze the glue out, get it with a good clamping system, and then wipe the excess glue off, you're good to go. It's going to last a very, very long time if you can do that. And that's what my goal is right here. This is going to be kind of a tedious operation because taking off the old glue, it's the old story again. It's much, 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 much harder to fix something that someone else has already tried to fix. If they brought this to me fresh break, oh, it would have been a piece of cake. Probably would have only charged them 30, 40 bucks. This is going to triple the charge probably, at least just on this crack alone. So because it's just so much harder to do. Getting that old glue off is the key to the whole thing. So I've been letting this soak. I don't know how well it's doing. It doesn't seem like it's really doing as well as I was hoping. I have had Elmer's glue just turn milky soft white and just scrape it right off. This isn't quite doing that. It seems to be a little bit softer than it was, but only a little bit. So without wasting a lot of time, I'm just going to start the old do it the hard way, and that is we'll just have to take some tools. Nothing really fancy or special, just any kind of little tools you got that you can get in there and scrape glue out. And I've got a few little specialty tools that I've made over the years that'll help me here, I think, too. Plus just a regular X-Acto knife. The couple of tools that I've made, the blade on this is just like a little tiny, very tiny little chisel. And I can get in there very precisely and pick glue out. Of course, I'm just going to use a regular X-Acto knife with that rounded blade. And then I've made another little specialty tool that has a little hook blade on it. And I can reach in cracks and pull glue out, scrape glue out with this, if I need to. So here we go. Trading glasses, taking off the long distance glasses, putting on the short distance ones. This is not going to be easy. Yeah, I can already tell. And so this is why the cost is much, much higher this way than it would have been the other way. Glue is very brittle, even though I've had it soaking for quite a while here this morning, 30-40 minutes soaking. It doesn't seem to have affected it. It's very brittle. The other problem with soaking wood, soaking something like this, depending on the old finish that was on there, especially if it was a shellac finish, it'll melt. The finish will literally melt from the water. So you can really do a lot of damage to the finish too. Fortunately, this finish doesn't seem to be affected by the water, so we're good. Water in general won't hurt a finish too much unless it's shellac. Shellac really will melt. But other finishes, water in limited quantities, of course, like a damp rag or something, is not going to hurt the finish. But in this case, what this takes more than anything, I guess you'd say, would be patience. Because this is going to take some time. This is probably going to be one of those things where we'll fast forward the video and you'll just see my hands going like I'm going to 90 miles an hour. That is, if I can figure out how to do that, being new to this video thing. My understanding was that this was owned by a very old lady. I mean, in her later years, obviously, but I think she got it when she was a young lady. The man describing it said she was one of them tough gals that went out there and cut firewood and split firewood and the whole bit. So she took it upon herself to do this, I'm pretty sure, according to the story I was told. And, you know, I don't know, for what she had to work with and what she knew about it, I guess, in a place or two, it didn't do too bad, but this place here is not very good at all. And believe it or not, this is nowhere near the worst I've seen. Nowhere near the worst I've seen. The worst I've seen, might as well tell you a story while I'm working on this thing. The gentleman brought me a guitar in the middle of the night in Dodge City, Kansas. We had just played a show there, got off stage. He came up to me, I'll never forget his words. He said, "I understand you can fix anything." And I said, "Well, I don't know where you heard that, but," I said, "I've been doing this," at that time I'd been doing it about 15 years, and I said, "I don't think I've ever run up to anything I couldn't fix yet, you know." And he says, "Well, this one's going to be a challenge." He said, "It's in very, very bad shape." Well, it was so dark, we were out on this parking lot and there wasn't a light around, and I already mentioned I'm colorblind, and I believe that colorblindness often makes you night blind because the colors just mixed together. Well, anyway, I couldn't see a thing. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face out there. I said, "Well, just throw it in the motorhome, and when I get back to St. Louis, I'll take a look at it and we'll see what's going on, you know." So sure enough, when I got back, it was 2 or 3 days, I opened up the case. I looked at it, and to my utter horror, could not believe how bad this guitar was. So I call him, and I said, "Mister," I said, "there's no fixing this guitar." It was an old 1950s model jumbo Gibson acoustic. And I said, "There's no fixing it." I said, "This thing's in the dumpster." I said, I mean, it's just every square inch of the body, literally every square inch of the body was broken. So I said, "We just need to throw it in the trash." I said, "There's no fixing this. Nobody on this planet could fix this." And he said, he literally started crying on the phone. And I thought that was a little bit unusual. And he said, "Well, it was my father's and it means a lot to me. I cannot throw it away. We've got to fix it." And I guess his sob story hit me pretty good. So I said, "Well, I tell you what, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'll fix it for you." I said, "I can probably salvage the back and the sides, but the top is not even sort of salvageable. It's busted in so many pieces, there's not even a point in trying to fix it." And so that made him perk up. I said, "But the problem is," I said, "before I do that," I said, "you're going to have to tell me how this instrument got in this bad a shape." I said, "There is no way this was natural causes." And he said, "You're right." He said it, and he says, "I'm ashamed of it." He says, I don't want to tell you." I said, "Well, you're going to have to tell me or I'm not going to fix it." He said, well, you know how cold it gets out here in Kansas in the middle of the winter time. And I said, well, I don't really, but I guess I can imagine. He said, well, it was 15 below one night, and I was in bed, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me, I remembered I had left my guitar in the trunk of the car. He said, I literally ran out there in my pajamas, jerked the guitar out of the trunk of the car, and I ran in the house, opened up the case, set the guitar in the corner right behind the wood stove, right next to the wood stove. He said, I jumped back in bed, and he said about 10 minutes later I heard it go, kapow! He said that just created all kinds of cracks up and down the back there. And I said, well, all right. I said, I'll buy that. He says, I understand. I said, I can see those cracks in the back and the sides. I can see how that would have done that. I said, but that didn't break the top like it broke it. I said, we got breaks going across the grain. You know, along the grain like this, sure, I can believe that on the cracks and things. A rapid change in temperature would probably break some of that. I said, but that's not what caused all of these breaks. There's breaks everywhere, and I said, there's breaks across the grain. I said, you're going to have to come up with a better story because that didn't do this. He goes, well, he says, I was hoping you'd buy that. He says, because you're right, that's not the whole story. And I said, well, you're going to tell me the whole story or I'm not fixing it. He says, well, you've heard those wives' tales about you leave your guitar next to a speaker and it vibrates and makes it sound better. And I said, oh yeah, I've heard that. And I said, it probably doesn't hurt it at all. It probably does help it, you know. If you keep that wood vibrating, it just kind of vibrates junk out of the pores of the wood. And I said, certainly don't think it'll hurt your instrument. I said, but it probably doesn't help it all that much either. He says, yeah, well, we heard those tales and we were drunked up one night, had way too much to drink. And I told my buddies about that. And they convinced me to make it vibrate faster. We could throw some firecrackers in it. I said, you got to be kidding me. He says, no, I'm not kidding you. He says, not only did we throw a firecracker in there, but we put a whole package of firecrackers in there. And the rest is history. So anyway, it did. It broke it in gazillions of places. Well, to fast forward that story 10 years, I repaired the instrument, got it back to him, and he was incredibly happy. And he was overjoyed. He said it looked better than it came from the factory, he said. He said he was just tickled with it. Well, anyway, 10 years later, I got a phone call one evening, and it was a lady on the line, and she says, sir, you probably won't remember me. You've repaired a guitar for us about 10 years ago. And she said, and she told me her name. I said, no, I don't recall. And she goes, well, you told us that if this was a case of child abuse, it was the worst case of child abuse in the history of the world. I said, lady, I know exactly who you are. And she says, well, my husband's passed away. And of course, I told her I was sorry. And she said, I've got an offer on his old guitar, and I want to know if I should sell it. And I said, well, how much was the offer? And she says, $3,500. And I said, sell it. So I guess I repaired it okay.